Rachel Blaney for 6 minutes, please, to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses here today for this study. I know that I've been wanting this study to happen for a long time, and I'm very excited and very thrilled that the support of the committee, we got it to as many meetings as we have. I know how important this issue is. So my first question is going to come to you, Colonel Jardine. First of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate the strength in which you have dealt with this issue today in front of us. And I also want to just thank you so much for the work that you've done on the Merlo-Davidson case. A lot of these women have reached out to my office and shared stories that I'm still finding space to hold in my spirit. And I just want to thank you for doing that work. It's so important to validate those voices and make sure that they're heard in the way that you have. And very pleased to hear that VAC sounds like they'll be honoring it and looking forward for when that happens. One of the reasons I wanted to study women veterans is because I am concerned about the fact that the attraction strategy on the military side continues to not be very strong. And I fully believe that there's a cycle here that we need to look at in terms of how women are doing in the military and how they're doing after their service as their veterans. And you spoke in your testimony today about the effects of military service on women differ from the effects of service on men. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about, in the work that you've done and in the service that you have provided, where do you see some of those differences and what things should we be looking for as we do this study?
Absolutely. In the scoping review that we did, we went into a fair bit of detail. So it's quite academic. I think if there is time, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Kelly, to just go over some of those, and maybe it'll give you a sense of what some of the things that we have found evidence for.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for the question. So the research is limited. That's one of the main findings in the report, but it did still have quite a few findings. So, for example, we know that women veterans are 2 to 3 times more likely to have medically released, and they have higher rates of certain physical and mental health conditions compared to men veterans. They also report a more difficult transition to civilian life. One study found that women veterans' incomes declined by 17 to 23% in the first 3 years post-release, whereas men's only decreased by less than 1%. Compared to women in the Canadian general population, women veterans have higher rates of certain physical and mental health conditions. Most concerning is that they have an 80 to 90% higher risk of dying by suicide.
I mean, that's quite devastating. And I think, I really appreciated the opening of the statement that you brought forward through the chair, of course, because the fact is that there's different realities. And I've heard stories from veterans, for example, that talk about having PTSD and having medication that they're taking that has prevented their ability later on to have strong reproductive health. And I've also heard from veterans, women veterans who've come forward and said that often when they're dealing with VAC, they hear things like, well, prove that this health issue you have now is related to your service. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that we don't see the sort of recognition of the different bodies. But also, I'm just curious if you could comment on this. There doesn't seem to be a process when you come into the system as women that your body is checked out so that you have a frame of reference when you get to the other side. Because it feels like there's a really big block there in terms of what I've heard from women veterans. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
That is a great question. I will say I hadn't thought about that in terms of you're talking about your medical when you join the Canadian Forces. I certainly don't remember anything about reproductive health in my medical, but that was 40 years ago, and I can't speak about what it is today. In terms of what VAC is doing, when I first took up this job, I remember getting a briefing from Veterans Affairs, and they told us that they are reviewing the Table of Disabilities. And this is the key document that captures all of the possible things that could be linked to service. And that's the key. But I have not seen the updated table as yet, and I haven't had any kind of update on it.
Well, thank you so much for that. This is a really hard, challenging study, and I think part of it, and you've mentioned it, is that there isn't a lot of research or data collected, so it's really hard for us to know. And I've done a little bit of a review of what's been done in our neighbors to the south, the United States. There's a lot more information. I think we could learn from them for sure. But I'm just wondering, when we look at that relationship, the intersection between VAC and D&D, do you have any ideas about what needs to change so that these departments work better to serve women, service members, and then women veterans?
And I know that there is a CAF-VAC joint steering committee. I am not certain what the scope of their mandate is and what they look at, but that would be a great question for them. What they're doing jointly. I can't remember the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
Just the intersection between the two. Like I said earlier, one of the things that concerns me is our attraction strategy for women on the military side is not going up. We keep setting goals. We're not getting anywhere near that. And then we hear that women aren't doing well on the other side. So just where's the intersection?
In 15 seconds, please, Miss Colonel Jordan.
I'll be honest with you, Mr. Chair, I'm not certain.
Thank you.